Good morning.
Good morning.
Please turn to page 7 on your chant book and stand, and we will recite the 3 refuges together.
I go for refuge to Buddha, my deeply awakened mind, the living source of understanding and compassion, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to Dharma, the path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy, and enlightenment, the way of peace, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I am aware that the 3 jewels are within my heart. I vow to realize them. I vow to understand living beings and their suffering. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and compassion, and to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to live simply and sanely, content with few possessions, and to keep my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worry and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly, so that understanding and compassion will flower, and I can help living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts.
Please turn to page 8, the Heart Sutra. We will start with chanting the title.
Dhamma Prajna Paramita Pranaya Sutra. The Bodhisattva of great compassion, from the deep practice of prajna, paramita, perceived the emptiness of all 5 skandhas, and delivered all beings from their suffering. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is emptiness, emptiness form. The same is true of feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. They are not born nor annihilated. They are not defiled nor immaculate. They do not increase nor decrease. So in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no thought, no impulse, no consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of consciousness, no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, no old age and death, no extinction of them, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cease from suffering, no path to lead out of suffering, no knowledge, no attainment, no realization, for there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva holds on to nothing but prajna, paramita. Therefore the mind is clear of any delusive hindrance. Without hindrance there is no fear. Away from all perverted views, one reaches final nirvana. All the past, present, and future, through faith in Prajna, Paramita, attain to the highest perfect enlightenment. Know then the Prajna, Paramita, is the great Dharani, the radiant fearless mantra, the utmost supreme mantra, which is capable of allaying all pain. This is true beyond all doubt. Proclaim now the highest wisdom, the Prajna Paramita. Gate, gate, para gate, para samgate, Ori Swaha. Gate, gate, para gate, para samgate, Ori Swaha. Gate, gate, para gate, para samgate, Ori Swaha. Dharma Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra.
Please be seated. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Kunga Nyima. I am one of the Dharma teachers here at the temple. Newly ordained in just the last couple months. It's wonderful to see you all here. Am I speaking loud enough for you? Okay. All right, great. So the title of my talk today is called The Karma of My Ancestors. Actually, now thinking back out of it, I probably should have called it The Karma of Our Ancestors. This Dharma talk came out of a conversation I had with my teacher, Yang Su. We meet every couple of weeks, and we were talking about, I was sort of talking about my gratitude and how much gratitude I have for everything that I have in life. You know, my family, you know, the job that I love to do, being able to practice the Dharma, having plenty to eat, you know, having resources that I need, living in a country where I had a lot of freedom, and also that's not currently at war within its borders. You know, all those things really made me grateful. And I said how lucky I felt for that to be. And Yang Su said, "It's not luck, that's your karma." And I didn't disagree with him right away, but in my head I thought, what are you talking about, you know? Because that wasn't my understanding of karma. But I took that and I sat with it, and sure enough, when I really thought deeply about it, I came to the conclusion that, yes, that was my karma. That's why Yang Su is my teacher and I'm the student. So my talk today is kind of about how I came to this realization that my karma that I'm experiencing, the gifts of my karma, the fruits of my karma, really come from my ancestors. Okay. So I want to start off by talking about two concepts, two perspectives that we can have on life. And these are often used in Buddhist analysis when talking about Buddhist psychology and theory. The first one is the mundane perspective. This is the perspective that we have in life, in our everyday living, that's motivated by our ego. You know, this is what helps us decide in life what I like to eat, who are going to be my friends, where I want to live, what kind of job do I want to have. All those personal likes, you know, those all come from our ego. And so that's a certain perspective we have in our life. The second perspective is called the universal or transcendental perspective. Okay? And this is the perspective that gives us meaning in our life. This is usually our spiritual perspective on life, okay? So we always have these two perspectives going on in our life. The problem comes when sometimes we seek to understand the spiritual outlook from our ego-centered perspective. The Buddha called this trying to ponder the unponderable. So he warned that there were 4 things that we shouldn't try to ponder because they're unponderable. And the third one is the workings of karma. Okay, so we have to be careful when we're thinking about karma and not think about it from our ego-centered perspective. He said if you did this, it would lead to madness and vexation. One commentator I read said it would make your head explode. So the mundane perspective, another way to think about this is if you go for a hike into the woods and you know there's all these trees there kind of blocking your view, it's really easy for you to get lost. Like, you know, in your day-to-day living with all the different activities you're doing, it's really easy to get lost, to lose your spiritual path. But if you were to, so that's like the mundane view. If you were to get out of those woods and walk up into the mountains so that you can see from a higher perspective, a broader perspective, you can see the forest and the lakes and the mountains and maybe the ocean way in the distance. That broader perspective, that's like the universal perspective on life, you know, kind of lets you see the big picture. So the challenge is to bring these two things together. So let me talk a little bit about karma now. There's 2 books that I've read recently, and that many of you have read also, which talk about karma, the Dharmapada and what the Buddha taught. Okay? In the introduction to the Dharmapada, it talks about karma as being an ancient Indian idea developed in the writings 500 years, in the spiritual writings 500 years before the Buddha was even born. Okay, so this was part of his cultural heritage. This is one of the things the Buddha learned growing up. Okay? And this idea was that karma meant cause and effect. Our actions in life have effects, and if you keep it simple, if we do things that are positive, then positive things will happen back to us. If we do things that are negative, then negative things will happen back to us. That's sort of a very mundane look at karma, right? That's how does it involve us? How is it related to our life? There's another part of that also in Indian thought, which deals with reincarnation, which says, if I was born into a bad situation in this life, then that is a result of something I did in a past life, which was negative, okay? And if I was born in a good situation in this life, then that might be a result of something positive that I did in a past life, okay? So maybe that's a little bit more of like a universal looking at like the big picture kind of perspective. So that was in the Dharmapada. Now what the Buddha taught in that book of the same name, the Buddha's understanding of karma, he understood karma in that way, right? Because that was his cultural understanding, but he also brought to it his own perspective after his enlightenment. He was really concerned with karma when it had to do with volitional actions, you know, when actions that we decide to do in our body, speech, and mind. And the thought was that depending on what we do, the results are going to be relatively bad or relatively good. Okay? We do relatively good things from our perspective, then we're expected relatively good things to happen to us later, and the same for negative things. But the key word is relative, okay? Because from our own personal perspective, say for example, just like I do an athletic one. If I was running a race and I lost the race, well, maybe we would say, well, the reason I lost the race was because I didn't prepare enough, okay? So that was my karma was I didn't win. That was bad for me, I didn't win, but somebody else won, right? That was good karma for them. It's kind of a relative, you know, same event, they won, I lost, but it's good for them, bad for me. Another thing is, if you look at it in terms of time, if I lose that race and it inspires me to train more, and then I win the next race, I might think back and say, well, maybe it was good that I lost that one because here I am doing better things in the future. So there's this relative, what was bad now is thought to be better. Somebody was talking to me just about that today. Lyle was saying, you know, something happened to him in his past that really changed who he is today. You know, it was a terrible experience at the time, and probably it would have been great if he could get that lesson in a different way. But now he's got it and it's ingrained, you know, and for him that's a positive, that becomes a positive thing now to look back on. Okay? So that's what I want to say a little bit about that karma.
Thank you.
Sure. So I want to go back to an example from my own life of karma, how I experienced that. I'm a social worker, and part of my job is to go and see people when they first admit to hospice services, okay? Usually I'm assessing two things. I'm assessing lots of things, but two main ones. How well do they understand their symptoms, their condition? How well do they understand how sick they are, right? Because in order to be on hospice, you have to be so sick that you only have 6 months to live. And the second thing I'm assessing is how well are they coming to terms with that? You know, do they know how sick they are? And then are they accepting that? Or are they denying that? So people are in a, you know, it could be anywhere on that spectrum, right? And also their families can be too. So it's a complicated situation going in there. So you really got to be, you know, open to what's going on to figure out where everyone is. So you can kind of guide them in the direction they want to go. So early in my career, I've been doing it for 15 years. So when I first started, like within that first year, I got an assignment to go and see a patient who was dying. The nurse who saw him thought he was very close to death. He hadn't completed a do not resuscitate order, which is actually a form you complete to say, you understand you're so sick that resuscitation, you know, pumping on your chest is not going to bring you back to life, so you don't want to have that done. This person had not completed that form, which sometimes would indicate maybe they're not really accepting how sick they are because they still want to have everything done, even though it wouldn't help them. So I went to the person's house, and they actually didn't live in a house. They lived in a motel that had been turned into long-term care, you know, long-term living. You know, so I don't know if you've ever been to a motel like that, but everybody, you know, is basically living there like they would live in an apartment, but they just have one room. You know, they have the bathroom at the back. You know, they might have a microwave or maybe a mini college fridge, but basically they're living out of a hotel, which you would normally wouldn't live in there long term. So it wasn't in a great part of town. I went up to see him, opened the door, and like he was right there. There's no room in this room at all. It's just full of their stuff. They may have been living here a long time, or they may have been forced to move from someplace else, but it was just packed full of stuff. He was laying on the bed. He was obviously could die any minute. You know, he had like hours to live. His eyes were open, but he was not responding. His breathing was really shallow. You know, he just didn't look good. You know, he looked really bad. His girlfriend was there, and immediately she started talking to me about physical therapy and doctor visits and taking him out to get tests. It was really obvious that she didn't understand where he was. So I thought, you know, that my priority was kind of help her to adjust to that spot, right? You know, start to talk to her about what I saw going on and how much time he might have left. Well, I didn't do that very mindfully, or I didn't do that very skillfully, because within a very short time, she asked me to leave. And then she called my boss up and she said, don't ever send that social worker back again, you know, because he is so uncaring. You know, I had the best of intent. I was really just trying to help her understand the situation. But, you know, you've heard the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And if we're not mindful of what's really going on and what people really need, our intention can really create a disaster. And that's what happened. I mean, in the end, they had to get a different social worker, but they never really met that social worker because he died probably that night or the next morning before another social worker could come in there. So she never really got that support she needed. And also, in addition to that, you know, not only was she upset that her partner had died unexpectedly, she was upset by the people that came to help her. Okay. So here's an example, you know, me acting in a way which was not helpful and then creating negative repercussions for myself. You know, I couldn't work with them. They you know, made me feel bad, you know, as a social worker, but also for them, you know, because they didn't get the support they need. So let me get back to my question with Yang Su. So remember I talked to Yang Su and I said that my situation, I was really grateful for my situation because of all the things that were happening to me in my life that were really, I thought really helpful to my practice. And he said, that was your karma. And I in my head was thinking, I don't think so. And the reason why I didn't think so was because I don't feel like I chose a lot of the things in my life. I chose some of the things in my life. Like I chose to go to school, to be a social worker, and to pursue that employment. And I, went and got interviewed and hired as a social worker. I chose, I guess, the person that I was interested in to date. But even us falling in love, I think, was kind of outside of my choice. We decided to have a family and get married and have kids, so that was sort of our choices. We decided to move to this area, and to Michigan. So those things seem to be in my control. But how did things that I was born into, how could those be a result of my karma? As an infant, I was born a U.S. citizen, and I was born in the United States, and I was born at a certain socioeconomic status. How could that be my karma? I don't believe in that reincarnation that the Hindus were talking about. So for me, that didn't make sense. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh says in many of his teachings that we are our parents. Okay, so we wouldn't exist without our parents, right? Their DNA is what formed us. Our genetic traits also form part of our personality. They raised us, which helped to form our personality as well. My parents fell in love, decided to get married. They were both U.S. citizens, so I became a U.S. citizen. Even though I was born in Japan, I was an American citizen. They had a certain economic level in their lives when I was raised, and I benefited from that, in my upbringing. So my parents' decisions, affected me. Their karma. My life was a result of their karma, and in a way, I am them as well. So that kind of goes to my parents, and then my grandparents also. My parents, neither one of my parents is a native indigenous person. My dad's parents were from Hungary, and they came over when they were teenagers, got married, had him. He was born in Ohio. He became a citizen. My mother's parents, a few generations in the U.S. longer than my dad's, but they came from Germany. So my grandparents and my great-grandparents are the reason that I was born in this country. So that's sort of a karmic gift from them, right? So if I think about using my ego-centered perspective, I can see how my parents and their grandparents made decisions that affected my life, and I couldn't exist without them. In a way, I am them. So that's my karma. But what about this country, this democracy that we live in, the freedoms that we experience here, all the wonderful technology that we have in our lives? How could that be a part of my karma? Well, here I want to take a more universal or transcendental perspective. And I want us to think about our ancestors as going all the way back, right? None of us came from nothing. We all came from our parents, our grandparents, all the way back to when human beings first started walking on the earth, right? We're all connected genetically that way. I think that scientists can trace your genetic history through your DNA 100,000 years, I read, okay? So there's this big picture here, okay? Our earliest ancestors were hunters and gatherers, okay? Gerard Diamond wrote a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel that some of you may be familiar with. He talks about how these early groups, these hunter and gatherers, built societies, started with agriculture, and then built city-states that enabled them to develop steel and technology, guns, so that they could basically dominate the world that they lived in, right? If we think about our own country, the United States, before the Europeans came here, the indigenous population were hunter and gatherers and maybe agricultural communities, but they didn't really have technology. They hadn't settled into these groups, And in his book, Gerard Diamond talks about how the reason some cultures developed that way and some didn't was really about the environment. You really had to be living in a place that was good to grow crops and had a good weather, so you could develop your crops, so you could really settle and support a big community, a large community to have that. So in our own country, the native indigenous population was here. The Europeans arrived. They brought with them their technology, their guns, their steel. They brought with them germs. 90% of the indigenous population was wiped out by smallpox and measles and the flu. So that's the karma. That's a karma result of Europeans coming here. And that kind of thing didn't just happen here, right? It happened all over the world. And that's part of all of our stories, None of us is separated from that. That's our ancestors, okay? So that's sort of looking at the big picture of karma, okay? So the important thing is, we have this kind of big picture and we have our unique individual perspectives. How do we bring those two together, okay? So one of the ways we can do this is we can think about the 4 factors of awakening I talked about in my last talk. Mindfulness, energy, investigation of Dharma, and concentration. If I think about my own experience as a hospice social worker, when I'm going to see my families for the first time, I really have to be mindful of their situation. A good way to think about it is bringing in that idea of beginner's mind, Shunryu Suzuki's beginner's mind. I know a lot, but I don't know these people. I don't know what their life has been like. I don't know how they were raised. I don't know what their perspective is on death and dying. I don't know what their education level is, how much they know about medical science. I don't know what their upbringing was like, what their families talked about, if they talked about death or didn't talk about death. I don't know any of that. So I really need to come in there like with an open mind, open hand, just kind of to see what's going on, okay? That takes a lot of energy, right? You can't just be coming in there all sleepy. Mindfulness doesn't mean like, you're just spaced out. You really have to pay attention. And then you're investigating, I'm asking them questions. I'm asking them questions about how they were raised. I'm asking them questions about, usually I'll ask them first thing, what does the doctor tell you about your condition? And sometimes they'll say, they didn't tell me anything. I'm like, then I'll just tell them, well, in order to get referred to hospice, you have to be really sick. And then I'll see how that sits with them. And sometimes I'll say, it means the doctor thinks you only have 6 months to live, And a lot of times I'll say, they're just making an educated guess. They don't know, right? And if they're a religious family, we might say that's up to God, But we're trying to like tread on eggshells, right? Because we don't know where people are. And then it's just concentrating on what people are saying, and so that we can pick up on what they're saying visually and with their nonverbals, so that we can do things that are skillful and that help them. So in our own lives, you're not all hospice social workers, but you're all interacting with people. And you can think about this as especially important when you're interacting with people who are difficult to work with, okay? Someone who you don't get along with, It's easy to just say, oh, they're a jerk, they're a bad person. But really, that doesn't help you at all. In order to bring skillful actions to that interaction, you really need to kind of understand where they're coming from. Why do they think this? Why do they believe this? Where are these ideas coming from? And when you start to know that and find that information out, if you find it out from them, you're really going to build a relationship with them, because people really want to know or want to share where they're coming from. And I think, that you can grow the relationship, and a relationship that's, been like this, you can grow it together just by asking a person why they do what they do, why they think what they think. Yeah. So I'm gonna wrap things up here with a koan. There's an old man attending Abbot Pei Chang's lecture. Pei Chang asks him who he is, and he answers, "I'm really a fox," because in ancient Japan, foxes are magical, and they could appear as people, right? So he's appearing as a person, but he's really a fox. And I've been reborn as a fox for 500 lifetimes, because in a previous life, when I was the abbot of this very temple, someone asked me, is the enlightened person free from karma or not? I told them, the enlightened person is free from karma, and because of that, I've been reborn for 500 lives as a fox. Can you please help me? Pei Chang replies, the enlightened person does not obscure karma. And this answer enlightened the old man. He's later freed from the body of a fox, and the fox body is given an honorable burial. So the message is, don't obscure karma. If we think that the gifts, or if I think the gifts of my life, the luck of my life, is because I was just a good person in the past, and then also in contrast, you, because you're less fortunate, are a bad person, that's obscuring karma. Karma is so huge, so complicated, goes back so far in time. There's no way you could possibly know all the causes and conditions that brought this person to this particular spot. The truest thing to say is, you're responsible for them being there, and so are they. And they're responsible for you being where you are, and so are you. I mean, we're all so interconnected. There's no way to separate out these threads, okay? Thank you very much. We will now sit for meditation. All right, so we have some announcements. I'll give some that are in the newsletter, and then I'll open it up to everyone else. So if you go to zengr.org, it has all the upcoming events. The Radical Dharma Book Club is on the first Wednesday of each month. The GRBT, the Grant Board of Directors, is canceled today. The Buddhist-based recovery meetings are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So do we have any other announcements that anyone wants to provide? Sir.
So my name is Daniel. It's great to see everybody again today. I just wanted to do the quick reminder for the donations. The Dana box is here at the temple. If you're watching us online, there's a link on the YouTube video, or you can donate here in person at either side of the temple. There's a black donation box there. I believe there's also an option to do some sort of PayPal donation if you guys don't have cash. But just wanted to remind everybody that keeping the doors open and lights on is based on your donations. And those donations go directly to those causes. Nobody makes any money. So if you're able to donate, please do. Thank you.
Just wanted to say a quick thing for the morning bell chant. If anyone, especially preceptors, is interested in learning that, anyone else online, anyone wants to learn to do that or to volunteer, let me know. Either email me or get with me after service. Thank you.
Anyone else have any announcements? Okay. If you will stand, closing chant. This is on page 9 in the chant book. For all unskillful actions ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, now my body, mouth, and thoughts, now I atone for them all. Vast is the robe of compassion, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Buddhist teachings for the benefit of all sentient beings. All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passion, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates without number, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. We have the right side, this side, that side, and off each other. We'll have social hour downstairs. Please maintain noble silence while we clean up here. Rooms downstairs.